So Unit 2 is all about genetics, and it starts on Chapter 11 with the introduction to genetics. And why is genetics important? Well, it explains why you are you, and you're one of a kind. So it's pretty important to know about, and it explains why family members look alike and why certain diseases run in families. And you can use this information to influence your decisions to stay healthy. And so the delivery of characteristics from parent to offspring is called heredity. Modern genetics was founded off the work of an Austrian monk, and it's this dude right here. His name's Gregor Mendel. And so genetics is the study of heredity, and if you remember, heredity is the characteristics passed from parent to offspring. And as he was working in the monastery, his monk duties included teaching and garden work, and he worked mostly with pea plants. And so what he noticed that these pea plants had traits, and a trait is a specific characteristic. And so in these pea plants, he noticed that the seed color, it could either be yellow or green, the seed shape, round or wrinkled, seed color, gray or white, flower position, axial or terminal, stem length, short or tall, pod color, yellow or green, and pod shape, inflated or constricted. Why pea plants? So pea plants are a good model system to use, and what makes up a good model system is these four characteristics right here. So pea plants aren't the biggest plant to be planting, and so you're able to grow a bunch in a small area. And another thing about them growing is they grow quickly, and so you can take a seed and have a full-grown plant within weeks at a time. And another thing is they produce a lot of offspring. Other examples of good model systems are mice and fruit flies. They meet these same characteristics that they don't take a lot of space, and they grow and reproduce quickly, and they produce a lot of offspring. And so this ethic issue that is right here is you wouldn't really want to do any dangerous scientific testing on humans. And humans don't really make up a good model system because we take up a lot of space, and we aren't very quick to grow and develop. It takes 9 months for a baby to be born and another 18 years to reach at maturity. And so we only really reproduce 1 or 2 offspring on average between humans. Lastly, in a good model system is you want the research that you find in these experiments to, as best as possible, accurately explain some characteristics in the human population. And so that will avoid the ethic issue. During sexual reproduction, male and female reproductive cells, and in this case, egg cell and a sperm cell, join together, and that process is known as fertilization. Gregor Mendel was working in his garden. He was having the pea plants reproduce with each other, and the initial generation that was reproducing is called the parent generation, and that's denotated by a P. And so as they reproduce, we call that, he would cross-pollinate, and that's an X. And the offspring that would come out are called the second generation, and that's denotated by an F1. And so this new offspring of purebreds are called hybrids. And so from this research that he was taking, he came up with 3 postulates, and we call those the 3 postulates of Gregor Mendel. The first postulate is an individual's characteristics are determined by genes that are passed from one parental generation to the next. So what exactly is a gene? So a gene is a segment of the DNA that controls the expression of a trait. So there's a gene that controls for seed color, seed shape, seed coat color, flower position, and the rest of these 7. As you notice in these different traits, you either see one or the other. So these different expressions of genes are called alleles. So there's alleles for yellow and alleles for green, specifically in seed color. And that goes for seed shape, pod color, pod shape, seed coat color, flower position, stem length. So in stem length, you have alleles for short and alleles for tall. And the next postulate was the principle of dominance. So some alleles are dominant and others are recessive. And then in dominant notation, you see their capital letters. And we'll do T for tall. And then the recessive would be lowercase for short. To determine which trait was dominant and which was recessive, Mendel would cross the parent generation, and from the offspring of the F1 generation, he would look at the traits and notice that every one of the offspring only showed one trait. And in this case, they all showed tall trait. And so from that, he determined that the tall trait was dominant over a short trait in the plants. From there, Mendel wondered if the recessive alleles disappeared. And so what he did was he would cross two plants from the F1 generation, and from that, the offspring you get are F2 generations. And so what he saw was there was a reappearance of the recessive trait, and 1/4 of the F2 plants showed the recessive trait. So you can't see it here, but this is capital T, T, so this is tall, and this is tall, and this is tall, and this one is the lowercase t. So he saw that reappearance of this recessive trait. Mendel's last postulate is during gamete formation, the alleles for each gene segregate from each other so that each gamete only carries one allele for each gene. So what does this mean? This means that each parent only donates one allele. So this parent has two alleles, two capital T's, and this parent has two little t's. It only gives out one of these t's. So what you notice is that one little t and one big T combine to show the big T and little t, and what you get out of that is a tall plant because the big T is dominant over the little t. I mentioned gametes in postulate number 3, and a gamete is just another word for sex cells. So alleles are segregated during the formation of these sex cells. So in humans, the male will donate one sperm, and this sperm will have the allele in it, and then the female will have the egg cell, and it will have the allele in it, and they'll combine to make a person. The same thing applies with plants and their sex cells. So you only notice one T is being donated here is because they both are little t's, so you're going to get the same donation here. But if you look at the F1 generation here, they have two different alleles, so you're going to get just one donation still from one parent, but you have a different type of combination. So you can either donate the big T or the little t here, and these are the kind of combinations that you'll get, and you'll notice that there's 4 different combinations, and you get 4 different outcomes. And in these outcomes, they still are being met. They're still tall plants, these 3, even though they have different combinations, because only having one dominant allele is masking the recessive allele. So you have to have the 2 recessive alleles to show the recessive small plant here. And these outcomes show why Mendel saw a reappearance of the recessive trait, and only 1/4 of the offspring had that recessive trait, because only 1/4 of the offspring were getting 2 recessive alleles, because the recessive alleles are masked by the dominant alleles, so it's important that they have both recessive alleles or they won't show the recessive trait. So that's it for section 1, and this is the vocab that I covered for this section, and it's important that you understand all the vocab that's being mentioned because it's very easy to mix it up. And so if you didn't get all these words, go back and make sure you are able to define them. Thanks for sticking with me on this first video, and that's it. So I'm signing out. See you guys in class.